Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Black Widow and Wasp? Part 2. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. There are some things in this world, no, this universe, that were not meant for the eyes of mortals. Things which were beyond their comprehension. One such thing was what they stumbled upon. It had all started out as a simple job. Chartering a boat with a skeleton crew to map a previously uncharted region in the South Pacific, nothing more than multi-beam sonar at first. What they didn't expect was to find, as they approached the Pacific pole of inaccessibility, was an island city. The crew members were by no means architects nor archaeologists, but along the coastline, they recognized a cyclopean masonry to be a clear sign this island was or had been inhabited long ago. Against their better judgment, the crew went ashore to explore the island, their minds perverted with the idea of becoming rich and famous for discovering the island. They didn't know what they had done, not yet at least. Either by their own accord or by other means, they were slowly separated one by one, until the captain had no idea where the rest of the crew had gone. Not that he really cared at the time. All that mattered to her at the moment was the chilling, cryptic voice which called out to her through the damp corridors, echoing aimlessly on and without rest in an ancient tongue foreign to her ears. She thought she heard her crew members crying out, screaming somewhere else in this labyrinth, but their cries felt like small voices in the back of her mind as she followed the ancient voice, drawn in like the sirens did to wayward sailors. After what seemed like an eternity, the captain happened upon a large chamber with a domed ceiling. The voices were now numerous, as if being spoken as one by a range of people. It was then she realized she was not alone in this chamber. No, standing around a large stone altar were 9 cloaked individuals, each one chanting the same word she was hearing in her head. Why, have you, come here, mortal, mortal. A deep voice bellowed, its raspy whispers making it seem as if the voice was coming from all angles. I came to explore, she replied, her body paralyzed in a fear like no other she had felt before. You came, seeking out, the unknown. The deep voice stated rather than questioned. The captain gulped and took a few deep breaths, mustering the little courage she had left before responding once more. Yes. My crew and I came to this island to seek out the unknown. She exclaimed, freezing as a wave of terror washed over the room. Mankind's, search for the unknown, she'll be, their undoing. Suddenly, 2 pairs of arms wrapped around her own, hoisting her off the ground and towards the stone altar. She began kicking and screaming, crying out for help which would never find her. Then she was held above the altar, her body parallel to the stone surface, so she was staring down at her own reflection in the smooth polished stone which held carvings of ancient runic symbols. Gaze upon, that which you have sought out. The runes lit up, and suddenly she was no longer staring at her own reflection, what she was now staring at instead was an incomprehensible horror. The feeling was beyond surreal. It made her feel like an ant standing before a giant, no. Like an ant standing before a god. Her mind tried to comprehend the unending, abysmal power she felt, but nothing came close. Then, as fast as the feeling came before, it vanished, and she was staring back at her own reflection. The cloaked figures released her, dropping her with an audible thud onto the stone altar. My God, she whispered, then, it came. It started out as a small chuckle, but quickly turned into maniacal laughter. She had seen it. The immeasurable power of the entity. Oh, how the thought of it made her shiver in both terror and excitement. She had seen just how small and insignificant she was in the grand scheme of the universe. It was enough to drive any normal person insane. And insane she had become. No longer was she Captain Ann Thompson. Her eyes, one of the cloaked figures called out. Paranoia. Bell, this sucks. Karen muttered, glancing back and forth between Blink and Psylocke like they were going to jump on her any second. What's so suck why about this? Psylocke questioned, taking off her shirt and laying out a dyeing kit. I was perfectly fine until I was dragged into this, Karen exclaimed. This clusterfuck. Blink suggested, playing with an apple by having it fall through an infinite loop using her mutation. Yes. This clusterfuck. Karen finished, spouting curses in German that neither Psylocke nor Blink could understand. Like it or not, we're stuck in this together. Psylocke stated, putting a towel around her shoulders and holding up a bottle of purple hair dye. You guys sure you don't want me to dye your hair? It's not going to do us any good. For fuck's sake, her skin's blue and mine's pink. Blink retorted, snatching the apple from its endless cycle of falling. Any bright ideas now? Karen asked, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. Well, that blonde we met, what did he call himself, Vortex? Psylocke questioned, continuing after Karen nodded her head in confirmation. Vortex has shown his face a few times in the city, but always it seems he's gotten away scot-free. Your point? Blink questioned. My point is maybe if we can find him, he can help us out or something. Silex said hesitantly, unsure of her own plan. That plan fucking sucks. Blink stated, sending the blonde woman a deadpan stare. Hey, it's better than nothing. She argued. Besides, I got a rat on his psionic emanation back during the riot, so I can use that to try and pick out Vortex from a crowd if I get near him. Of it? Telepathic tracking. I used telepathy to track him. Why didn't you just say that in the first place? Because the way I explain it makes it sound cooler. Makes you sound like a fucking nerd. Shut up, Clarice. Make me Betsy. DCH. You win this round. Scylla conceded, focusing on dyeing her hair over aimlessly arguing with Blink. Hey, Karen called out after a few minutes of silence. How do we know if Vortex is still even in the city? What do you mean you can't leave the city? Naruto winced in pain as his eardrums were assaulted by his mother's exclamation. His parents and siblings lived on the other side of the country, just outside of San Francisco, so these FaceTime calls were one of the few ways in which they could contact him. Ashina, honey, what your mother and I are asking is why you can't leave the city. His father Minato Uzumaki, when they got married, he took her last name, asked in a more calm voice. It's a really complicated story, but now I have a job. Naruto explained, scratching the back of his head nervously. He never liked lying to his parents, but there were just some things which you had to tell little white lies for. It's a pretty simple job, really. With everything he knows now, it was anything but simple. They actually set me up with an apartment in the city, they're even taking care of the rent. Emma actually bought the 45th floor of the Adelarthits where he would be staying for the time being. Pays a lot of money too. That one wasn't a lie. To the Hellfire Club, worrying about six figures was like pissing in the wind. You still haven't told us what this job is, son. Minato stated. I'm the personal secretary to Sebastian Shaw of Shaw Industries. No, seriously, what's your job? Kushina asked. I'm his personal secretary. I'm not lying. Naruto replied. But that's how much are you getting paid? Kushina questioned. On top of rent? About he'd saw 100,000 or so. Annually? Monthly? Naruto could hear his mother flipping out on the other end of the call, while his father just smiled and gave him a thumbs up. Congratulations. Minato forced out, though Naruto could understand why. At the age of 20, he was already making as much as his mother or father did, maybe a little bit more. It was like their son had the devil's luck. I've gotta go now, tell Menma and Natsumi I say hi. We love you. Good luck with your new job. Aye. Naruto said, ending the call as he was speaking. The blonde sighed, releasing a held breath as his hand slumped to his side tiredly. He was actually feeling pretty tired, despite not doing anything which would have physically exhausted him. So much could change in 2 months. One moment, he was in the middle of a mutant riot, the next thing he knew, it was the end of the semester, and he was moving into a penthouse. Maybe he really did have the devil's luck. Penny for your thoughts. To Naruto's credit, the scream that came out of him was not girlish. It was a manly scream, and that's how he would tell it. Still, he was nonetheless surprised when Emma had called out to him, only a few feet behind him when she spoke. "Hey Emma. What are you doing here?" Naruto exclaimed, picking himself up off the ground while the blonde woman leaned against the wall. "I own this floor, so technically, I'm your landlord," Emma stated, holding up a keychain with numerous keys, one of which he was certain was the key to his suite, and jingling them in front of her fellow blonde. "That still doesn't explain why you're here," Naruto stated. "I feel a disturbance in the force," Kushina muttered, perking her head up suddenly, as if alerted to some mysterious noise which no one else could hear. "Is this about Rogue One, dear?" Minato questioned, sending her a deadpan stare. "What? No. Of course not," Kushina exclaimed quickly, waving her hand dismissively. "It's just it feels as if something's off." "Sure, dear, something is off," Minato responded in a teasing, sing-song tone of voice. "Hey. My hunches are never wrong." "Oh really?" "Yes, really. Remember the taco truck? The zoo incident? My sister's wedding? The Disneyland incident?" "Right." She conceded, wincing as the memories of that fiasco came to mind. "Might I remind you that you're still banned from the entire premise?" Minato added salts to the wound. "You have to admit, their reaction was funny as hell," Kushina said, chuckling a little as she remembered the silver lining of what had been dubbed the Disneyland incident. Of course, honey," Minato replied. "You know, with Naruto off in New York, Menma still off at college, and Itsumi still in school, you wanna..." Knock knock knock. Kushina hissed through her teeth when someone decided to knock on their door, disappointed that the moment had come and gone. "I'll get it, Kushina," Minato said, making his way to the door and opening it to whoever it was that was knocking. "Greetings, may I come in?" Standing at the door was a strange man. Yes, strange was the best way to describe him. He was 6'2", nearly 6'3", with gray eyes, black hair and a goatee. His attire was what really caught Minato's attention. A blue monk robe Eastern, but he wasn't quite sure from which region. Similarly colored pants, boots. And a red cape around his shoulders. Oh, and he was levitating, floating in midair. Of course. Minato responded, taking a few seconds to comprehend the sight which he was seeing. Honey. He called out, tilting his head slightly to yell back, though he kept his eyes on the floating man. What? Kushina yelled back. There's a floating man at our door. Again. There's a floating man at our door. I call bullshit on that. Oh really? Minato retorted, just as Kushina was making her way to the door. Yes, really. Total bullshit. She trailed off at the sight of the floating man in a red cape. Kushina Uzumaki. The man stated rather than asked. My name is Stephen Strange, Dr. Stephen Strange. I still don't understand how you know this guy. Minato stated, pouring out 3 cups of tea for himself, Kushina, and this Dr. Strange fellow. I left the magical world a long time ago, though I try to keep an ear out for things when I can. Kushina replied. He's actually the Sorcerer Supreme, if my information is correct. The what? Was the only thing Minato could ask. Your sources are correct. I am the current Sorcerer Supreme. Dr. Strange said. So why are you here? Kushina questioned. A few days ago, the Ancient One appeared to me in a vision. She told me to seek out an Uzumaki with red hair. That could be a number of people. She exclaimed in outrage. And a volatile temper. Strange deadpanned, causing Minato to chuckle slightly. His wife's temper was fierce. Oh that's me. Kushina conceded, playfully slapping Minato to stop his chuckling. I was told to pass on this message. Strange cleared his throat before speaking again. To Minato, the statement sounded like a jumble of consonants and vowels which made absolutely no sense whatsoever. Kushina, on the other hand, clearly understood what Strange had said, and her face had paled 3 shades, and she broke out into a stark sweat. Don't understand. What does that mean? Minato questioned. To be honest, I'm not quite sure myself. Strange responded, stroking his chin as he pondered his own statement. I know what it means. Kushina spoke, her voice no louder than a whisper. Her entire form was shaking, as if a cold shadow was looming over her. Well? What does it mean? Strange asked. In his house at R'lyeh, dead Cthulhu waits dreaming. Paranoia giggled, laughing to an unknown joke which made any passerby give her a wide berth. Almost immediately, she stopped giggling and began to move with a purpose. And promptly crashed into a girl with purple hair. Hey! Silik exclaimed, falling to the ground along with Anne. Ho sorry doll. She apologized, though she was giggling like a mad hatter all the while. Watch where you're going. Silik snapped at her, dusting the dust off her clothing as she got back up and walked away. She could sense Vortex was nearby, or at the very least she was getting closer. Paranoia giggled, standing back up carefully so as to not disturb the object she was hiding under her clothes. The world would soon know. They would know. And there's nothing they could do about it. Hail, Cthulhu. The legend is ancient, one which has been passed down by word of mouth through my family for generations upon generations. A pair of shaky hands gripped the mossy stones which made up R'lyeh, peeking around the corner to witness the haunting chants which echoed throughout the corridors. He was bearing witness to a feat of magic unseen for a millennia, rituals which were considered to be the earliest forms of the so-called black magic. Many of the details have been lost or forgotten, but the story still is enough to make sense of what happened. Which is. It wasn't like this was for a good reason. The man found his tongue dry as he withheld the urge to scream out in horror, abhorred by the sight of the ritual's requirements. The green mist was circling above the participants, forming a complete circuit with more mist being added from the souls of the 6 performing the ritual. Below the mist, laying on a stone altar, was a man, one of the cultists. If his assumptions were correct, his stomach slashed open and his gut spilt out and in his hands. Long ago, in the earliest days of humanity, we were not the dominant species, not on this planet, not in this galaxy hell, not even in this universe. You're talking about the Great Old Ones. I don't get it, the Great Old Ones. It's not something we have time to explain to you, Minato dear. Yet we have time for this story. Yes. Now as much as I love you, Minato, shut up. I'm trying to tell the story. Yes, dear. As I was saying, the story I was told was that my ancestors, 2 men by the name of Hagoromo and Himura, were approached by the cosmic entities. He wasn't even writhing in pain like a sane person would be, rather, he was squirming in ecstasy, screaming out all the obscenities he knew, while his eyes rolled to the back of his head. Then, suddenly without warning, he stopped moving, arching his back as a red mist shot out of his mangled body, mirroring the circling green mist above him, before condensing into a horrible goop of red and green. Upon them, they were bestowed 6 stones of infinite power. The younger brother, Hamura, foolishly tried to harness the stone's power with his bare hands, but his body could not hold the power of infinity, and thus his physical form ceased to exist. The older brother, Hagoromo, approached a blacksmith and asked him to craft a weapon to which the stone's power could be channeled through. And with this weapon, he used the power of infinity to seal away the great old ones into an eternal slumber, or at least that's what we thought. Viz Uzumaki, if there are people indeed trying to awaken these great old ones, they would go for Cthulhu. It is the only one which was sealed on this world. The rest were scattered by some means. I was never told how. The man didn't need to think on it any longer as he heard the sound of rapidly approaching footsteps. He needed to move before he was caught. Scampering, nearly tripping over his own 2 feet, he ran as far as he could go before rushing around into a dead end, one which the cultists would not concern themselves with, at least not at this time. He nearly knew this labyrinth like the back of his own hand, and time had long since slipped his grasps from how long he's been in these ruins. Sure, he would scavenge enough food and water for sustenance, but in his mind, he was not living, was surviving. Thus was his tragic survival lorekeeper. So what do we do? Strange asked, stroking his goatee in thought. It's obvious, Kushina replied. We have to find Rely and stop whoever it is from awakening Cthulhu. Wad if you guys are too late? Minato questioned, causing the 2 other occupants of the room to freeze up. Let's hope we aren't too late, was Kushina's only response. Ring Minato's phone suddenly vibrated, his eyes widening as he read the messages that were coming to him. I need to turn on the news, he said, rushing to grab the remote and turn on the television. Boom, the sounds of screaming civilians was beginning to become annoying to Jan, especially considering that she heard them on a weekly, almost daily basis. She and Hank split to cover more ground, but everything seemed normal to her. Still, something felt different about today. Wasp. A familiar voice reached her ears and she spun around just in time to see the last person she was expecting. Vortex, she spat, venom laced in her voice. Bioelectrical energy began to cackle around her fists. What are you doing here? Well, I was just in the neighborhood, decided to check out what all the commotion was. Naruto replied casually, mentally sweating at the murderous look on Jan's face. Oh really? Jan asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. Look, I'm not looking to pick a fight with you, honest to God. Naruto exclaimed, holding his hands up in the air in surrender. Jan took a second to look him over, mentally deciding on whether or not he was telling the truth or not. Boom, the explosion that came shortly after was enough to make up her mind. Fine. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, she said, growing to normal size and making her way over and into Naruto's face. But if there's even the slightest hint that you'll betray me, won't hesitate. You know, I can't help but find it ironic that this is happening, right? Naruto stated, nervously chuckling as he scratched the back of his head sheepishly. Her response was to grab him by the scruff of his collar. Let me set something straight. I don't need you. A Wasp. I don't need you, I especially don't need your help. Wasp. The only reason I haven't shocked you until you've passed out is because I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. Wasp. You only get, like, 1, maybe 2 benefit of the doubts from me. Wasp. What? Jan finally yelled in frustration at being interrupted. Naruto raised a finger and pointed shakily at something behind her. Oh, don't mind me, I'm just taking my enemies. There, floating in a laid-back position in the air, was a woman with long flowing brown hair, glowing white eyes with no pupils. Oh, and the rest of the body was made of a green energy. That, Naruto said, hold his hands up as he formed 2 water spheres in preparation to strike. Who, little Almi? The green woman asked in a faux hurt voice, as if taking his one statement as a personal insult. Why, I am but a humble thespian, mister. I'm a country bumpkin girl with big city dreams. She exclaimed, her voice sounding innocent and sweet, though Naruto and Jan thought otherwise. Are you one that's causing all these explosions? Jan asked. Weelo, what's the point? Let's just get this over with. The woman said as she began to form spheres of the green energy around her fists. Wait, get what over with? Naruto questioned, keeping his guard up the entire time he spoke, and after. One of you is going to say something generically superhero-ish, then we're going to fight. The woman huffed, almost disappointed at the outcome which was to come. Because that's how things always go, right? I'm not a hero. Naruto stated. Vortex. Hey, I'm just saying. Technically, I'm a supervillain. A horrible supervillain. Yeah, a horrible hey. Well, you can't deny that she's tried to fight you because of the simple fact that you're a villain. The woman stated. I fight him because he's terrorized the city. Jan argued. Is he a terror though? I mean, you two aren't clawing at each other's throats right now. She retorted. Who even are you to judge us? Jan questioned, barely containing her growing rage. Oh, how uncouth of me. The woman exclaimed, bowing down to the two mockingly. I am paranoia. acolyte of the Great Old One. What kind of name is Paranoia? Naruto asked, causing the green woman to lose her footing and fall in an almost comical, dare he say cartoonish way. This coming from a guy named Vortex. Jan commented. I use water. And Wasp. Really? Naruto retorted. Let's just drop this argument. Jan suggested. Agreed. Naruto responded, both archenemies turning to the green woman, who had recovered from her fall. Now then shall we begin? Paranoia questioned, forming green spheres over her fists, then firing them at the duo. Get down. Naruto exclaimed, tackling Jan to the ground as the spheres of unknown substance sailed by overhead. Get off me. Jan yelled, shrinking down and causing Naruto's face to kiss the concrete roof. Not a second later, Jan flew out from underneath Naruto, bioelectrical energy balls in her hands which she then fired off at Paranoia. Ooh, I knew this would happen. Paranoia giggled, weaving in between the shots before charging at the downed Naruto. She jumped up and suddenly the green substance which made up the majority of her body expanded her right foot just before she kicked Naruto in the stomach. Oof. Son of a, Naruto cried out, the kick sending him flying off the building. Vortex. Jan exclaimed, flying to Naruto in an attempt to catch him while she could. Only to be met by a wall of green goo. She stopped just short, close enough to the goop wall that she could feel the heat it emitted. Ah! Where do you think you're going? Paranoia called out, snapping her finger and causing several winged creatures with octopi-like heads to form out of the green goop. Take care of our falling friend. She commanded, the winged creatures flying off down the side of the building. How did you do this? Jan questioned in shock. Everything just happened so fast, separating Vortex and herself, it was almost as if. You planned this out. She exclaimed, coming to the conclusion that caused Paranoia's eyes to widen slightly before a grin spread across her face. It pays to be prepared, Paranoia responded in a sing-song voice, her grin turning predatory in a flash. Now what to do with you? Huh. This is not at all what I pictured this to be like. Naruto muttered, his body flat in parallel to the approaching ground. He felt as if he should be panicking or something, but thing was, he wasn't feeling anything. Perhaps deep within his mind, he wanted to kill himself, to get out of this whole mess with the Hellfire Club, with mutants, with everything. Or maybe he realized there was no way he could survive this, that his brain had accepted the fact he was going to die and was at peace. Splatty was broken from his monologue when something warm, slimy and sticky all at the same time grazed his cheek and splattered on his back. Spinning to face the sky, he was greeted to the sight of several flying creatures with octopus heads made out of. Well, he wasn't quite sure what they were made out of, only that it was green and matched the same stuff that grazed his cheek. Screee. One of the creatures released an inhuman cry, which seemed to be some sort of signal to the other creatures to rush at him. Oh hell no. Naruto yelled, attempting to form a sphere of water in both his hands. Only for said sphere to fly up faster than he was falling, nearly hitting two of the creatures. Okay. Think, Naruto, think. He mentally exclaimed, trying to adjust to the new circumstances he was fighting in. Scree. The creatures exclaimed, one bold creature diving down, trying to land a strike on Naruto. Instinctively, Naruto formed a water tendril and slashed horizontally, making a long arc of water which hit the bold creature, causing it to instantly dissolve. His eyes widened at the revelation. These fuckers were weak to water. Grinning, he began forming as many water spheres as he could and just let them go, causing the 6 remaining creatures to go into a panic. One by one, the creatures were dissolved by the water until the last of them had been defeated. Naruto was beaming triumphantly when a stray thought entered his mind. How far was he from the ground? He spun around just in time to see how close he was to his death. Thus, he decided that in his final moments, he would close his eyes and scream. Whip whip whip. Aye. Naruto's scream died down when he quickly realized he wasn't a red splatter on the ground, causing him to open his eyes and see that he was nearly 3 feet from the New York concrete, his arms dangling in his vision and blood rushing to his head. Hey Thier, how's it hanging? A new voice called out, causing Naruto's head to dart in all directions that he could look to try and find its source. Who's there? Naruto called out, looking up, or was it down? To find that there were 3 webs keeping him from kissing the concrete. His eyes widened as he realized who had saved him. Oh no, he muttered. Oh no. That's not usually the response I get. A red and blue blur flipped into Naruto's field of view, and as Naruto got a clearer look at his savior, he saw a man standing at 5'10" wearing a red and blue skin-tight suit, a red mask with wide eyes and black outlining them. And even while the man was crouching, Naruto could still see the infamous spider logo on the chest. Spider-Man, Naruto whispered in shock. Bingo. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, who just happened to swing by and see you falling, swirly. Spider-Man stated. It's Vortex. Naruto said, sending the masked vigilante a deadpan stare through his goggles. Yeah, I know, Swirly. Spider-Man retorted, shooting another web which bound Naruto's hands together. You've done a pretty good job trying to stay under my radar, but it doesn't seem like that was enough. Erg. Let me go, damn it. I have to get back to the roof. Naruto exclaimed, struggling against his restraints. It was one thing seeing Spider-Man's webs restraining someone, and it was another thing to be restrained by them. For crying out loud, what was this shit made out of? Liquid steel. I'm not sure if I can do that, buddy old pal. Spider-Man said. You see, there's some stuff going down in the city, everyone's in a panic, and somehow, I know you are involved with it. No. You don't understand. Wasp. Whoa, Wasp is nearby. Well, I guess, considering you two are, like, archenemies or something. Spider-Man rambled. God damn it, get me out of this shit. I've got to help Wasp. Naruto yelled, causing Spider-Man to do a double take. First of all, language. Second of all, why would you want to help your archenemy? Spider-Man questioned. Boom, an explosion suddenly rocked the ground. Spider-Man looked up just in time to see the resulting explosion coming from the top of the very building they were in front of. Oh. Was all he said. That's why. Naruto responded, still struggling against his restraints. Well, I guess for the time being, I have no choice but to trust you. Spider-Man stated, jumping up and tearing the webs which held Naruto upside down, causing him to fall down on his face. Fuck. He cursed, barely bracing himself in time before hitting the ground face first. But do anything suspicious, and I'll leave you strung out for the police faster than you can say, Spider-Man. The red and blue vigilante finished, just as Naruto was pulling himself up off the ground. Understood. Yeah, I get it. Wasp said something along the same lines. Naruto said dismissively, breaking his hand restraints with the help of Spider-Man, and then brushing the dust off his shoulders. We should probably get up there before something else happens. Let's go then. Spider-Man exclaimed. The thing I see, don't think there's enough water in the area for me to go all the way up. Well then, how did you get up there last time? I used the stairs. You're not thinking. What? No. I'm not even sure that would work, would it? The city, as the vigilante superhero had said, had gone into a panic when the explosions began. And since the detonations were all clustered around Midtown, the majority of Manhattan had been evacuated or was in the process of being. And since no one was around, nobody would see the sight of a man wearing a red and blue skin-tight suit climbing up the side of a building while another man wearing a dark blue trench coat that had a green stain in the center of it held on for dear life in what was likely to be the most awkward piggyback of either of their lives. Not one word about this. To anyone. Ever. Spider-Man stated, climbing up at a slower pace than usual due to the added weight. Wasn't planning on it. Naruto replied. Thankfully, even with the added weight of another person, Spider-Man was quick in climbing up the building as Naruto got off once they were on the roof. Ho 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 ho. Spider-Man. Paranoia called out, almost like how a child would to their idol. I can't believe of all the possible scenarios, this is the one to happen. Wasp. Naruto exclaimed, seeing the auburn-haired heroine unconscious and in the arms of Paranoia. Ah. Paranoia said as Naruto tried to get closer, pulling out a ceremonial dagger of twisted design. Not one step closer. You bitch. Naruto cursed, although he relented and backed away. Poor girl, she actually thought she stood a chance. Paranoia stated, her face morphing into one of fake pity. She will make an excellent acolyte. Over my dead body. Naruto yelled. That can be arranged. Paranoia suddenly froze, sensing a presence which made a sliver of fear appear in her eyes. Well, this was unexpected. A what? Spider-Man questioned. Well, this is where we part ways, gentlemen. Paranoia stated, a green and red portal appearing behind her. With that, she rushed through the portal, an unconscious giant still in her arms, and just as swift as the portal appeared, it vanished. Just in time for another portal, one of orange color, to pop up. Damn it. We're too late. Strange cursed. I told you we would be. You should have just let me use my divine magic. They would have sensed us coming from a mile away. Who are you two? Spider-Man questioned. Mom? Mom, Naruto exclaimed, his initial reaction catching up to his brain less than a second later as he coughed, attempting to cover up his outcry. I mean, you seem familiar. Who are you? Well, my name is Kushina Uzumaki. Kushina said after a moment of hesitation, motioning to Strange after she introduced herself. And this Dr. Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme. Greetings. Strange said aptly. Like she said, I am the Sorcerer Supreme. Every magical anomaly falls under my jurisdiction. Oh, well, you should have been here a few minutes ago, you know, before a hellish green portal of ooze opened up and stole a superhero. Spider-Man quipped, causing both Kushina and Strange to frown. So we're too late. Strange muttered. Not necessarily. Argued Kushina, walking over to the green, gooey residue left by the portal. She reached down and pinched a small amount between her fingers, investigating the goop with an empipedical eye. Everything leaves a magical residue. If I can identify its signature, and I damn well can, then it's just a matter of locating a magical ping with the matching spike. How long will this take? Naruto questioned, causing both magic wielders to turn their attention to him. And why would this matter to you? This is a matter concerning the magical world, although Strange began, floating over into Naruto's personal space. I do sense the potential for the mystical arts in you. That was my archenemy that was taken. Naruto admitted, albeit he forcefully said the word archenemy. If anything bad's going to happen to her, then it will be me taking her down. Very well. You may assist us in this endeavor. Strange stated, holding up his hand to Kushina as she opened her mouth to protest. And before you say otherwise, Kushina, we will need a mutant's help for what we will need. Beg pardon? Naruto called out, breaking out into a nervous sweat at Strange's statement. How did he know he was a mutant? Easy, I read your mind. Strange replied, a sly smirk on his face which radiated amusement. By the way, you should find a way to put up some mental barricades. It was way too easy to do it, and I'm not even that proficient at telepathy. Note to self, ask Emma to put up mental blocks. The masked blonde thought, scratching his head as he began to speak. Okay, so, do you need a mutant, which I am definitely not, by the way. In order to get his help without causing a commotion, a mutant will be needed for an easier cover-up. Strange stated, making a motion with his hands and causing an orange portal to appear. Come now, time is of the essence. He motioned for Naruto to enter first, to which the blonde did with much hesitation, followed by Kushina and finally himself. All the while, Spider-Man watched this all go down with a strong amount of confusion. The only thing he was left to wonder. What the hell just happened? Meanwhile, Naruto, Kushina and Strange popped out of an orange portal, one that closed not a moment later, and left them beholding the sight of a grandeur mansion. What is this place? Naruto asked curiously, looking around the area to find kids running around as early as 12 to those who appeared to be his own age. But what really caught his attention were some of the kids. Each one was different, but Naruto saw things like kids flying in the air, freezing the ground beneath their feet, some even had non-human appearances. His eyes widened as a sudden realization dawned upon him. They were mutants. They were all mutants. Welcome to Xavier's school for gifted youngsters. Strange stated, just as one of the older students approached them. Hey there. Can I help y'all with something? A girl with auburn, nearly brunette hair with a white streak in the front asked. She seemed relatively normal, at least compared to some of the other students Naruto got a glimpse of, save for the fact she was wearing a pair of long white gloves. Yes, my companions and I need to speak with the Good Shepherd about very urgent matters. Strange responded. The girl seemed to think on it for a moment before giving a reply. Alright, I'll take y'all to the professor. But she pointed towards Naruto, causing him to flinch in surprise. You, sugar, have to wait somewhere until they're done. Naruto silently nodded, not trusting his words at the moment and opting instead to remain silent as they traveled into the mansion, stopping by a closed door to a lecture hall along the way. Wait in here, sugar. The girl ordered, to which Naruto complied and entered the room, the door closing with a creaking groan as he released his grip on the handle. Naruto continued to keep his silence, noticing that he was the sole occupant of the lecture hall at the moment. So, curiously, he began to look around. All the while wondering what was happening with his mother and Strange and, nearly in the forefront of his mind, Wasp. Then Jan groaned as she began to regain consciousness. There was a dull throb in her skull, and she attempted to reach up with her hands and rub her aching temple. Keyword being attempted. A metal clinking sound jarred at her ears, and it was at this point she realized that she was bound by metal shackles. Her eyes widened as her mind caught back up to her. She had been defeated and knocked unconscious. Where was she now? Panicking, she began to struggle against her restraints, and then she heard giggling, the sound of which sent a cold chill up her spine. Oh goody. You're awake. Paranoia exclaimed gleefully, watching Jan continue to struggle to break free. Don't get any ideas about shrinking either, I had those wrist restraints especially made to keep you from doing that. What do you mean? How? Jan exclaimed furiously, attempting to shrink her size, but found that something was blocking her. Magic. That's how. Paranoia cried out, now giggling furiously like a madwoman. Paranoia. Your presence is needed. A new voice called out, causing a frown to appear on the green woman's face. I will be there shortly. She responded in an almost robotic manner, the frown vanishing from her face and being replaced with a look of indifference. Guard the prisoner while I'm away. She said before turning around and walking away. Jan lifted her head up to watch paranoia leave, and when she was certain the crazed woman was gone, she began to struggle against her restraints once again. Cease your struggles, child. For soon you shall see the truth of our Lord and become one of us. A cloaked figure exclaimed, most likely the person who was ordered to guard her. Well, I'm pretty sure I don't want that. Jan retorted, continuing to struggle against her bindings when she saw it. The figure was dashing between the shadows of the dimly lit room, silent, going unnoticed by the guard who had begun to watch her with a curious gaze. Soon enough, the shadowy figure had made its way behind the robed guard, hold a rock high up and poised to strike. Wham! The guard didn't realize it until it was too late and took a single blow to the head before falling down. The shadowy figure did not stop there, it knelt down and continued to slam the rock in its hand against the guard's skull several times more before ceasing. If Jan wasn't showing any signs of panic before then, she surely was now. The shadowy figure rose, standing tall over Jan and looming like a mysterious, nightmarish demon of darkness. It proceeded to raise the rock high above itself once again. And then it struck. Naruto hummed to himself as he paced around the room. A sizable amount of students could be held in here at once, and the white dusty writing on a chalkboard near the bottom was enough for him to know that it was used recently. His gaze then found its way to a desk situated near the chalkboard, the teacher's desk if his assumptions were correct. Strangely enough, he saw no chair nearby to go with it, but what he did see were clusters of papers, a coffee mug with assorted pens with and without caps, and a few photos propped up in small frames. He eventually meandered his way over to the desk and circled around so that he could clearly see the photo's contents. The first was a picture of several people, all seemingly normal except for the yellow and black uniforms they wore, all except one woman. He noticed two blue people, one whose skin was blue and the other who appeared to have blue fur. But besides their appearances, Naruto did not recognize who any of those people were. The second photo he looked at was of a battalion, or something like that. He wasn't entirely sure about what number of soldiers counted as a battalion. It was a black and white picture, and there were signs of aging in the film that was used. He was, however, able to see one person in that picture who looked like another person in the first picture, though he still didn't know the person's name. Finally, the third picture he looked at was a black and white photo of a bald man in a wheelchair, shaking hands with John F. Kennedy. That's the professor in the chair shaking hands with JFK. A new voice called out. Naruto suddenly panicked as if he were caught robbing a bank, and his grip on the picture frame slipped. He tried to grab the frame before he dropped it, but luck was evidently not on his side at the moment, and the photo frame became affected by gravity and fell. Only to freeze halfway down and go in the opposite direction, floating up and maneuvering around until it was gently placed back on the table where it was originally found. Naruto spun around to face the person responsible for saving the photo, and almost immediately a small tinge of red appeared on his cheeks. It was a woman, standing at 5'6" with green eyes and long, red hair. And her attire. Well, it left little to the imagination, as it was a green and yellow suit which seemed to be a second skin, coupled by a yellow sash around her hips. He was just there. Naruto stuttered, trying to come up with an excuse for what he was previously doing, but his brain was in a panic from not only being caught messing around, but the newfound enamor with the retweeted woman. Damn his red hair fetish. It's fine, Naruto Uzumaki. The woman said, causing Naruto to freeze up. How did she know his name? Unless. You're a telepath, Naruto exclaimed accusingly, feeling a small, near unnoticeable throb in the back of his mind, something he had felt before from when Emma had done the same to him. Telepathy is just one of my powers. She stated, extending a hand to the blonde. My name is Jean Grey. It's nice to meet you. Naruto replied, hesitantly shaking her hand. She arched a brow and the corners of her lips curled up slightly into a smile. You're an Omega level. Not quite a bit close, Jean muttered, her eyes roaming over him as if judging him. I'm sorry. An Omega level what? Mutant. I didn't know what you're talking about. Naruto denied, his heart beating faster at the very mention of the M word. Yes you do. Jean refuted. I don't even need to read your mind to know that you know. I'm a psychic, Naruto. Or do you prefer Vortex? Vortex? At least when I'm dressed like this. Naruto stated, motioning to his current attire. So if I were to do something like this, Jean started, making a motion with her hands and causing his goggles and coat to fly off his body. I could call you Naruto. Hey. That's not what I meant. Naruto exclaimed, his cerulean blue eyes filled with fear as he tried to reclaim his concealing accessories. Then what did you mean? Jean questioned, levitating the dark blue goggles closer so she could inspect them. She plucked said item from the air and held it up to Naruto. I want to know what the difference is between you and Vortex. The difference is that Vortex is a super villain, a mutant. Naruto trailed off, a lump forming in his throat, which choked the words he thought would come out of his mouth. You don't want to say you're a mutant. Jean stated, her face twisting into a look of pity. You've known since you were 16 and have been hiding the fact ever since then, even from your parents. You have seen all the things about mutants in the news, right? Naruto asked. All the controversy, the riots, crimes. That's not me, I'm not one of them. And Vortex is. She retorted, causing Naruto to shake his head. I just wanted to understand my powers a bit more, but I couldn't just wait every few months to go home and practice. Naruto explained. So, I decided to put on a disguise, go someplace hidden and then you got caught. Jean finished. Wasp called me a super villain, and from then on every time I went out dressed as Vortex, that's the stigma I carried. Naruto continued, snatching his trench coat from midair. I wasn't a mutant, I wasn't a super villain, Vortex was. So you've basically dissociated your mutant identity from your human identity. She commented. Without warning, she walked towards the window, motioning for Naruto to come closer as well. Tell me, when you look out there, what do you see? Naruto looked to where Jean was motioning and happened upon the sight of mutants running, laughing, joking. Acting normal. Do you see any riots or crimes going on out there? She questioned. Being a mutant doesn't mean you can't be normal. This school is a safe haven for our kind, somewhere we can just be people, not just mutants. Naruto stood silent, for he could find no words to say in retort to Jean's statement. Instead, he just continued to watch those who were like him enjoy themselves without worrying about being labeled a criminal. A small part of him was jealous. The professor wants us to go to him now. Jean stated, handing Naruto his goggles before making her way to the door. Come on, I'll show you the way. Jan was perplexed. Her eyes were still shut tight, anxiously awaiting the cold chill of death to take her. Only it never came. Clang clang clang, the sound of metal being hit reached her ears, and she quickly opened her eyes to find that the chains connecting to her bindings had been severed. Quickly. We have to get out of here. The shadowy figure exclaimed in a hushed voice, frantically looking around as if some unknown terror would pop out at any second. She wanted to argue with this stranger, but now was not the time, as she too realized that the commotion would catch the attention of nearby enemies. Shakily standing up, the shadowy figure quickly grabbed her hand and dragged her along at speed she was not used to running. The shadowy figure led her through a series of twisting and turning corridors to the point she felt a bit nauseous, finally stopping when it was certain they weren't being followed. That was too close, the shadowy figure said, peeking around the corner just in case. Finally, Jan was able to get a clearer look at her savior and found a rather ragged man. The very presence of him just screamed survivor. He stood at 5'10", with charcoal eyes that held an intense, unknown fear, black hair with patches of gray which were so unkempt and tangled that it formed a three-point crown at the top of his head, bags under the bags of his eyes, and a long, shaggy beard with patches of gray like his hair. He wore the remains of what may have been formal attire, a white dress shirt which was so faded and yellowed it couldn't even count as white anymore, black pants which were torn off near the bottom, a faded red vest which was unbuttoned and likely the most intact item of clothing he had on him, and the tattered remains of black shoes. You're real, aren't you? The man asked, placing one hand on Jan while the other pinched himself. Of course. Jan replied, sending the frantic man a confused look. Oh, where are you? It's not safe here, not safe. They'll be looking harder now, especially with all the commotion happening now, he mumbled, his murmurs reverting into nonsensical words which Jan could not make out. Hey. I asked you who you are. Jan exclaimed, causing the man to immediately cease his muttering and look at her. Oh. Sorry, it's been a long time since I've had any sort of human interaction, the man said, bowing a little as he introduced himself. My name is Howard. Howard Philip Lovecraft. While Jean was guiding Naruto to the professor, he replaced his goggles over his eyes and felt just that safer with his identity concealed. But the inner turmoil he was experiencing was nowhere near as easy a problem as concealing his identity. He wasn't given much time to dwell on it as Jean opened a door revealing Dr. Strange, Kushina, and the man in the wheelchair, the one from the photos he looked at. Thank you, Jean. The man said, turning his attention to Naruto. So this is the young man you spoke of? Yes. This is Vortex. Strange stated. He has encountered a powerful acolyte of the cult of Cthulhu and came out mostly unscathed. A pleasure to meet you. The man stated, swerving his wheelchair closer to the masked blonde and extending his hand. Charles Xavier at your service. Likewise, Naruto replied, hesitantly shaking Charles's hand. Suddenly, just like with Jean and Emma, he felt a small dull throb in the back of his head, albeit this one was definitely more subtle than either of the women were. You are a peculiar one, Mr. Vortex. Charles commented, turning his attention back to the Sorcerer Supreme. Very well, you came to me for my assistance, and you shall have it. Thank you, Xavier. Strange said, bowing slightly to the paralyzed mutant. You will need to come with me, Doctor Strange, and I would like you to come with us as well. Charles commanded, pointing directly at me. Naruto said with a questioning glance. Yes. There is something I would like to show you. Charles stated, wheeling on ahead with Strange and Naruto in tow. Just out of curiosity, where are we going? Naruto asked, looking around as the decor of the hallway shifted from Victorian to something that would be found in a science fiction movie. You'll see. Charles said mysteriously, stopping in front of a large door with a large X on the front. The blue light sprung forth from the center of the X, scanning Charles for a moment before vanishing. Once it did, the door began to slide open, revealing a rather spacious spherical room with a platform in the center which they were moving towards. So this is how you do it. Impressive. Strange stated, nodding his head a little as he looked over the room. How he does what? What is this room? Naruto queried, stopping when Charles turned to him and spoke. This is how mutants in need are found. Thesis Cerebro. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.